Many people remember Oldsmobile as an aging brand that could no longer keep up with its European and Japanese rivals. Yet for decades, Oldsmobile was one of the most advanced marques, not only within General Motors, but in the entire American automotive industry. In 1937, Oldsmobile became the first manufacturer to offer a four-speed semi-automatic transmission, known as the automatic safety transmission. The drivers selected low for first and second gears, or high for third and fourth. By the 1940 model year, the company had introduced Hydromatic Drive, the first mass-produced, fully automatic four-speed transmission. In 1962, the Oldsmobile Jetfire became the world's first production car with a turbocharged engine. 4 years later, the Tornado arrived as the first mass-produced American front-wheel drive car since the pre-war Cord. Over the following decades, Oldsmobile generally grew stronger and sales continued to rise, although the brand also suffered several serious setbacks. In the late 1970s, its reputation was badly damaged by GM's troubled diesel engines. Even so, Oldsmobile sold more than 1 million vehicles in its peak year of 1985. That made it the third best-selling brand in the United States, behind Chevrolet and Ford. Japanese cars and European luxury brands had already become serious competitors, but Oldsmobile still held a very strong position. Poor decisions by General Motors management eventually left Oldsmobile struggling to survive by the early 1990s. In earlier years, the position of each GM division had been reasonably clear. By the end of the 1980s, those distinctions were disappearing rapidly. Oldsmobile, Buick, Pontiac, and Chevrolet were all receiving similar front-wheel drive platforms, bodies, engines, and interiors. This created a serious problem for Oldsmobile, because it now had to compete not only with outside rivals, but also with other brands inside GM itself. Buyers increasingly struggled to understand why they should pay more for an Oldsmobile when a nearly identical Pontiac, or even a Chevrolet, was sitting nearby. As a result of this internal policy, Oldsmobile models of the late 1980s became less distinctive and less recognizable. One of the brand's best-known and most successful names, Cutlass, was used almost everywhere. The Cutlass Sierra, Cutlass Calais, and Cutlass Supreme were completely different cars built on different platforms. As a result, the Cutlass name stopped identifying one specific prestigious model and became little more than a general label applied to several unrelated cars. At the same time, Japanese and European competitors were becoming stronger. The problem was much deeper than GM management wanted to admit, because all of this was happening while the American market itself was changing. A young professional who might once have moved from a Chevrolet to an Oldsmobile now had more attractive choices. Honda and Toyota offered modern, highly reliable cars with strong reputations and an effective balance between affordability and prestige. Later, Acura, Infiniti, and Lexus combined modern engineering, quality, and status. Mercedes-Benz and BMW offered an even more prestigious image, while Pontiac, another GM brand, appeared younger and sportier. Oldsmobile, meanwhile, was slowly but steadily becoming a brand for older and more conservative buyers. Many American marques faced the same problem at the time, but Oldsmobile was one of the few that made a serious attempt to solve it. In 1988, Oldsmobile launched the advertising campaign, "This is not your father's Oldsmobile." It was meant to show that the brand's cars had completely changed. They were now front-wheel drive, more aerodynamic, more advanced, and more modern. But Oldsmobile made two mistakes at once. The first was the slogan itself. Every commercial reminded younger viewers that Oldsmobile was, above all, their father's brand. The result was almost comical. The company was trying to prove that Oldsmobile was no longer old-fashioned by constantly reminding people that it once had been. The campaign failed to win over younger buyers because a slogan alone was not enough. When they entered an Oldsmobile showroom, they saw not only the new Cutlass Supreme, but also the Cutlass Sierra, 88, 98, and other cars that still had a fairly traditional character. The second mistake was that Oldsmobile's core customers really were older buyers. There were still many of them. They remained loyal to the brand and valued exactly the qualities that the advertising was now trying to reject. The campaign was effectively telling them that everything they had liked about the old Oldsmobile no longer mattered. The brand was trying to attract younger buyers while distancing itself from the people who were still buying its cars. Motor Trend later described the campaign as an attempt at rejuvenation that alienated buyers of every age. Even after the campaign failed, Oldsmobile continued trying to modernize its existing model range. The cars became more aerodynamic, gained more electronics, and the brand was promoted as a high-tech alternative to imports. But the old model names remained, and the cars were still too similar to other GM products. At the same time, Oldsmobile was preparing a much more radical solution. By the late 1980s, work had begun on a car that was not meant simply to update another model, but to completely transform the image of the brand. In 1989, Oldsmobile introduced the experimental tube car, a streamlined four-door prototype with smooth bodywork, frameless windows, and a wide strip of rear lights. Its design ideas eventually became the basis for the production Oldsmobile Aurora. Interestingly, Division Chief John Rock, who had recently moved over from GMC, at one point proposed replacing the Oldsmobile name entirely with Aurora. The idea was to separate the new Aurora even further from the brand's previous models and prevent buyers from associating it with Oldsmobile's old image. Aurora was given its own badge in the form of a stylized letter A. The Oldsmobile name did not appear anywhere on the exterior of the production car. It remained only on the audio system and the decorative engine cover. The car was meant to be seen first as an Aurora, not simply as another Oldsmobile. The production Aurora was built on a heavily reworked front-wheel drive G-body platform. During structural strength and torsional rigidity testing, the car even broke GM's test rig. Engineers then had to use equipment designed for testing truck frames. According to the company, the finished body was twice as rigid as the federal requirements for passenger cars at the time. Production began in January 1994, although the Aurora was sold as a 1995 model. The production car retained the futuristic appearance of the concept and looked nothing like an old-fashioned sedan. Its sleek profile, smooth surfaces, and distinctive lighting at both ends made it look genuinely new and ultra-modern. For its class, the Aurora was very well equipped. Standard features included dual-zone climate control, front airbags for the driver and passenger, leather upholstery with wood trim, a 6-speaker audio system with a CD player, a trip computer, and 8-way power-adjustable front seats with 2-position memory. Optional equipment included a Bose hi-fi audio system with a separate amplifier and CD changer, a power sunroof, heated front seats, and the special Autobahn Performance package. This package changed the final drive ratio from 3.48 to 3.71, added Michelin tires with a higher speed rating, and raised the electronic speed limiter from the standard 110 miles per hour to 135. The Aurora could reach that speed thanks to its all-aluminum L47 V8 with 4 overhead camshafts. The engine was based on Cadillac's North Star, but its displacement was reduced from 281 to 244 cubic inches. The cylinder bore was reduced from 3.66 to 3.43 inches, while the 3.31-inch stroke remained unchanged. Paired with the 4-speed 4T80E automatic transmission, the 250 horsepower engine produced 260 pound-feet of torque and gave the Aurora fairly strong performance. The sedan reached 60 miles per hour in around 8 seconds, while the excellent exhaust note only added to the sense of speed. In late 1992, early versions of the Aurora's 244 cubic inch V8 were fitted to 3 specially built Oldsmobile Aerotech speed prototypes. During 8 days of testing, they set 47 speed records over various distances. The car also had its weaknesses, including a rather unusual layout. Comparable models from BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Lexus, and Infiniti used rear-wheel drive, while the Aurora was built on the front-wheel drive G-body platform with a transversely mounted engine. The V8 was installed sideways rather than longitudinally. It also sat almost entirely ahead of the front axle, resulting in less than ideal weight distribution. On the road, this translated into heavy handling, understeer, and a lack of the lightness buyers expected from a car with sporting ambitions. Buyers also discovered another drawback. The driver was almost enclosed inside a cockpit, with the center console angled toward them, while interior space was more limited than the car's large exterior dimensions suggested. Still, many reviewers agreed that Oldsmobile had created a genuinely good car, and most importantly, one that was anything but an old man's sedan. The Aurora went on sale as a 1995 model with a base price of $31,370, almost $5,000 more than the most expensive Oldsmobile in the existing range. Its main competitors, however, cost similar money. The Lexus ES300 was priced at $31,670 and was a direct price rival. One comparison test also included a BMW 325i, priced at $31,300, and a Mercedes-Benz C220 at $30,375. Oldsmobile management repeatedly suggested that the Aurora's true rivals were the more expensive Lexus LS400 and Infiniti Q45. Compared with them, the new Oldsmobile was meant to look like an especially attractive value. Then came what had almost become a familiar story for American car brands. Something similar had happened with Mercer, when Ford tried to sell its modern, fast, and aerodynamic European cars through the Lincoln Mercury dealer network. The Geo brand faced a similar problem. The Oldsmobile Aurora found itself caught between two very different groups of buyers. Traditional Oldsmobile customers were used to more affordable, spacious, and conservative cars such as the 98. The Aurora was more expensive, more unusual, and less spacious inside, so many existing customers did not make the switch. At the same time, owners of Lexus, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Infiniti models were in no hurry to visit an Oldsmobile dealership. Existing customers did not fully understand the car, while among new buyers, the Oldsmobile name still lacked the necessary prestige. Still, almost 48,000 Auroras in the first model year could hardly be called a failure. For an expensive flagship, that was a respectable result. But in 1996, production fell by roughly half to 24,000 cars. After that, annual production remained between 20,000 and 28,000 units. Beginning in 1996, the Aurora received small technical updates every year. Oldsmobile continued refining the car, still hoping to gain wider market acceptance and improve sales. But most of the changes were barely noticeable, while the price gradually increased from around $33,000 to $36,000. Buyers found it difficult to understand why a car that looked almost unchanged was becoming noticeably more expensive. Around 145,000 first-generation Auroras were produced before production ended. Although this result fell well below General Motors' expectations, the company still decided to introduce a second generation. The new Aurora retained the general styling of its predecessor, although its appearance was now closer to GM's standardized corporate design than to the unique shape of the original model. By then, many of the first Aurora's styling features had also spread across the rest of the Oldsmobile range. The second-generation Aurora continued to use the G-body platform and retain the 244 cubic inch V8. To attract more buyers, Oldsmobile also introduced a version powered by a 214 cubic inch V6, paired with a 4-speed automatic transmission. But only 10 months after the second-generation Aurora made its debut, General Motors officially announced that the Oldsmobile brand would be phased out completely over the following 4 years. The second-generation Aurora remained in production until March 2003. It became one of 5 Oldsmobile models to receive the farewell Final 500 edition. The last 500 cars were finished in a special dark cherry metallic color and fitted with unique badges. A total of 68,552 second-generation Auroras were built over a little more than 3 years, with almost 80% of them produced for the 2001 model year. Combined production of both generations reached around 214,000 cars. On April 29, 2004, the final vehicle carrying the Oldsmobile name was produced. It was a 4-door Alero GLS sedan, and workers at the assembly plant covered its body with signatures and farewell messages. After that, Oldsmobile passed into history, joining the list of vanished American car brands. All we can do now is wonder whether the Aurora might have saved Oldsmobile under different circumstances, or whether the company should have focused on smaller and more popular models that sold in much greater numbers. Perhaps the Bravada could have become the brand's main success story as SUV sales continued to grow. We will never know. The Oldsmobile Aurora will be remembered as one of the most frustrating and perhaps even undeserved failures in automotive history. It had everything it needed to succeed. But as so often happens, it fell just short.